you most beautiful and most amazing top 10ers, how are you doing today? Are you enjoying the Olympics so far? So reports have recently emerged of police foiling a number of terrorist plots surrounding the 2016 Rio Olympic Games, with each Olympiad posing a serious risk of disaster. Join us as we take a look back at the 10 most shocking disasters and scandals surrounding the Olympics. In at number 10, this one's really brutal, we have the birds roasted alive in Seoul in 1988. So we all love a good Olympic spectacle, so it makes sense that the idea of releasing a flock of white doves would be a lovely aesthetic idea for an Olympic opening ceremony. What better a symbol of peace than a dove, especially in the then turbulent South Korea? Unfortunately, things did not go quite to plan, as dozens of doves were released at the Seoul Olympic Stadium. Now, instead of flying off into the skyline as they were supposed to, they flew to sit on the Olympic cauldron. Yep, we all know where this is going. The doves thought, hey, this is gonna be an excellent perch, but big mistake. The cauldron was then lit regardless of the doves, and they burned alive. Yep, they absolutely burned alive on live television and in front of tens of thousands of concerned onlookers in the stadium. In at number 9, we have New Zealand's Jiu-Jitsu Olympian kidnapped by police in Brazil 16. In July 2016, Jiu-Jitsu Olympian Jason Lee was pulled over by police and fined around $600 for driving without a passport. After Jason claimed that he had no money, he was then kidnapped by the police and forced to withdraw from an ATM. He was then warned not to report the incident, which he did anyway when he learned that no such law existed. Following that, things escalated when Brazilian military police showed up at his rented apartment, but he refused to let them in. He has since fled the country for fear of his safety. In at number 8, we have boycotts in Moscow in 1980 and in LA in 1984. Now, the Olympics are supposed to demonstrate the spirit of sportsmanship, defined as ethical, appropriate, polite, and fair behavior when participating in a game or athletic event. Now, the Olympics are also supposed to be a time for peace and for countries to come together. Unfortunately, this was far from the case in 1980 and in 1984, as Russia and the United States avoided one another respectively. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter called for a boycott of the Russian-hosted Moscow Olympics as a result of the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan. Now, this meant that some athletes participated under the Olympic flag rather than their own nations, and ultimately 65 countries avoided the games, including Canada, West Germany, and Norway. Great Britain also scaled back their involvement massively. In response, Russia boycotted the Los Angeles hosted games of 1984, along with the entire Eastern Bloc. In total, over 16 countries boycotted the states, including Poland, East Germany, and North Korea. Generally, for me, a boycott spells disaster. In at number 7, we have death from heat stroke in Rome in 1960. So in 1960, the Summer Olympics were held in Rome in over 40-degree blistering heat. That's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Nonetheless, the Olympians plugged on, with many suffering from heat exhaustion. Unfortunately, during the 100-kilometer ride in Rome, Knud Jensen died. One of the 4-man Danish team had already dropped out of the race due to sunstroke after the first lap, which meant that all 3 remaining Danish cyclists had to finish the race for the team not to be disqualified. Jensen then told his teammates that he felt dizzy, with the 2 other cyclists clutching his t-shirt to keep him from falling off the bike. However, when they eventually let go, Jensen collapsed and fractured his skull. He later died, never regaining consciousness. In at number 6, we have villages destroyed by the Beijing 2008 Olympic planning. In order to build the Olympic Stadium in Beijing, China bulldozed many impoverished areas and drove many out of their homes in order to create their attempt at the best show on earth. 1.5 million people were driven from their homes. What would happen if you protested this? Well, you'd be arrested, that's what. There were even some reports of police beating protesters to death. What has happened to that grand Olympic area now? Well, much of it is abandoned. Was it really worth displacing that many people? I guess not. Next up, getting pretty crazy at number 5, we have the Nazi Olympics of Berlin in 1936. So rather than one specific disaster, let's just say the entire 1936 Summer Olympics were a disaster, as it was pretty much hosted by the Nazis. With swastikas aplenty around the city and German Jews banned from joining the games, Hitler wanted to use the event to spread his Aryan super race ideals, and he also kicked out many Roma residents out of the city as he did not want people seeing them there. What with this kind of anti-Semitism and nastiness surrounding the Olympics, I think that we can safely say that it was a disaster. In at number 4, we have Sochi construction deaths. The 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics meant a whole lot to Russia, who really wanted to put on a spectacular event that nobody would forget. Unfortunately, in their enthusiasm to build a spectacular stadium and Olympic village, working standards fell very short. Now this cost the lives of many construction workers. So for the Olympic building project, which was a much smaller scale than that of London in 2012, Russia suspended labour workers' rights, effectively meaning that they had none whilst they were working on this construction project. Now this led to really poor working standards, with over 60 workers reported dead, compared with 0 dead in the much bigger London Olympics. This was also just the tip of the iceberg. These were the people that were reported dead, with many protesters suggesting that illegal workers from surrounding countries such as Uzbekistan were also killed, but their deaths were hushed up. Getting really nasty from here on out, at number 3 we have the Centennial Park bombing in Atlanta in 1996. In Atlanta in 1996, 5 years before 9/11, Olympic organizers failed to foil a terror plot by an insane right-wing Christian fundamentalist. Eric Robert Rudolph planted the largest pipe bomb in then American history at the Centennial Olympic Park. Undercover detective Richard Jewell realized there was a threat as he identified a possible bomb. He did his very best to evacuate the stadium, but the nail bomb went off, wounding 111 people and killing 2. Jewell, the savior of the incident, was then considered a suspect by the FBI, who extensively interrogated him before they would find Rudolph was the perpetrator. He was then sentenced to life imprisonment at the Colorado Florence Supermax prison. Unfortunately, the stress also took its toll on Jewell, who died aged 44. In at number 2, we have the Munich disaster of 1972. Despite high tensions between East and West Germany, the 1972 Munich Summer Olympics wanted to remain as apolitical as possible. They really wanted to distance themselves from the image of a military Germany. They wanted to be as far away from the Nazi outpourings in the 1936 Berlin Olympics as possible. Unfortunately, the games ended up being as far away from apolitical as possible when 17 people lost their lives. At the time, tensions between Palestinians and Israelis were at a peak, and a group of 8 Palestinian terrorists decided to enact terror at the games. Scaling the wall of the Olympic Village with the help of 2 do-good athletes who thought they were helping out fellow competitors who'd been locked out after hours, the group broke in. 8 Palestinian men from the group Black September donned tracksuits, scaled the wall with duffel bags that were filled with rifles and grenades. Using intel from West German neo-Nazis, they snuck into the ground floor apartments of the Israeli Olympic teams. They then proceeded to take hostages with the hope of negotiating the release of prisoners in Israel. Those taken hostage were mainly wrestlers and weightlifters, but their strength could not help them as they were surprised while they were sleeping. The Israeli government refused to negotiate with the terrorists, and a botched rescue from the German police went horribly wrong. Now this resulted in the death of all 11 hostages, 1 police officer, and a number of the terrorists, some of which, by the way, got away. Okay, so we have reached that point where we're going to discuss the biggest disaster to befall the Olympic Games, and sadly, not many people even know about this. In at number 1, we have the 1964 Lima football riot. Lima hosted a football qualifying game prior to the 1964 Tokyo Olympics, with Argentina playing Peru. Argentina scored first, and then a would-be equalizing goal was disallowed for Peru, leading to a pitch invasion. The Peruvian police deployed tear gas to try and stop the rioters, but this made matters even worse as rioters tried to flee the ground, creating a crush. Many fans tried to escape through a tunnel down a staircase onto the street. However, the shutters that led into the street were closed. This wasn't visible to those at the back of the push, so the crowd surged forward to try and escape the tear gas, which meant crushing many bodies against the shutters. 328 people died from asphyxiation and hemorrhaging, making it the worst disaster in footballing history and the event with the highest death toll in all Olympic Games. So guys, kind of a sad one. It's good to look back at history, but that was the top 10 Olympic disasters. Let's hope that this is all of them and there are no more future disasters to come. Hopefully everyone can learn from what has come before. So I've been Rebecca Felgate, this has been Most Amazing Top 10. If you like this video, you can give it a good old thumbs up. If you know someone that will be interested in this content, then make sure you share it with them. And most importantly, make sure you're subscribed to Most Amazing Top 10 for more top 10 videos. And I will see you next time.